Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. Is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 23rd of August 2023, and this one is just a segment taken out of my full news update, the second video of my news update this morning, because it was too long. I'm not going to do a full Frontline update in the detail I normally do. I did this again yesterday. It's just that I've had my news videos have been too long, so I apologize. It will be a somewhat truncated Frontline update, but it should give you all that you really need to know about what's happening, and a few pointers towards my next video, which will be on an analysis as to whether this counteroffensive is a success or not. Anyway, over to the previous segment I did earlier today. Okay, now moving on to Frontline bits and pieces. I just thought I had to share that with you. That is sort of breaking. So here we go again. There is news, and actually Andrew Perpetua's live stream last night talked about how actually there is ongoing activity on the northern borders. There's talk about Bryansk here, which is there's Bryansk. That's all the way up there. Is that what was mentioned? Yeah, Bryansk region. So, as a result of an attempt by the Ukrainian Deep Reconnaissance Group to break into the territory of Bryansk region the day before, 4 Russian soldiers were killed, 7 more were injured, including 2 border guards. A source has said. I'm getting that wrong because my map starts it. So my blue line stops there. So actually no. So yeah, that's the northern border of Ukraine here. It's one to the west of Kursk and Belgorod. So Belgorod, Kursk, and then Bryansk. There's activity by deep reconnaissance groups into Bryansk. This kind of activity has been ongoing, even if it hasn't been reported. I haven't reported anything since basically the major attacks that were taking place into Belgorod some time back. That is, I think, significant that is still happening. We see evidence of a CV 9040 here. This is the Swedish infantry fighting vehicle due to OPSEC. It's not posted as it happens, says Defmon, but there's video evidence of it working around Tinkivka. Now, we go to my map to see what's going on. There are claims of Russian successes according to Syriac maps. I'm a little bit delayed in changing that actually. That show that the Russians are moving on there. This is not agreed to by all sources really. Ukrainian sources are saying that the Russian claims are somewhat over-egged here, but certainly I think the Ukrainians are under some pressure around Tinkivka. I don't think that there's any doubt of that, and I think the Russians are sensing that this could be an area where they could have more success than perhaps other places, like, for example, Kamazianivka, where they've been pushed back. They are potentially, causing the Ukrainians some trouble there. Right. If we go to, okay, where should we go to next? Well, we're going to go to Bakmut in general. I've talked to you how I think Bakmut has quietened down somewhat. There have been claims from ISW and other sources that it has been a lot calmer. There's still activity around Klishchivka, but I don't think the Ukrainians are properly going for it in a way that they were maybe a month ago. Now, a deep state map has some movements for the Russian forces being pushed back here. Syriac map still has the Russians in control of Klishchivka. Andrew Perpetua's live stream was pretty definite about the Russians not controlling Klishchivka. There may be elements. He said that there's video footage that is coming out of Russians in weird places, he says, but he thinks that is footage that is from June, and that's what's confusing people, a bit of disinformation. So throwing out footage of Russians in kind of these areas of Klishchivka, but that's 2 months ago. There might be elements within Klishchivka, not control elements, but elements maybe being pushed back. Now, the footage, I might do a separate video just on this attack that I talked about lots. There's several different angles of this footage of the Russians attacking along here. Now, in Ukraine, the latest, the Daily Telegraph podcast, you got Hamish Brecken Gordon, who is a former tank commander, saying that it was an absolutely terrible attack by the Russians. That they were bunched up. It was in the daytime, etc., etc. It's just like everything that you learn in tank school. They did the opposite, right? Andrew Perpetua was saying, but on the other hand, this was the only place they could attack. So because of the nature here, I'm going to see if I can go 3D. I'm not very good at 3D with the browser base one with just my handling of the mouse. Nonetheless, actually, that's not bad. So you can see there is an incline there. I can't accentuate that by giving it like Andrew Perpetua does on his. You can give it a 300%, overemphasis, so you can see it more clearly. But you can see that then it goes uphill. This is Tinkivka here, and it goes uphill to this ridge area there, and you have here this area of trench networks that is he talks about that being the main area of Klishchiivka. The town itself is irrelevant. This is the area that you want to hold and that's important. So the Russians have two choices basically. They can either attack from this direction, so you've got a very soft incline around here, back from sort of Andriivka area, but that's too difficult. They don't control that land. Or you can attack from the north along the ridge here to take the trench network there. Now that's what the Russians did, and Perpetua was saying that actually that is a clever thing to do. As in, I don't know whether it's clever. It's the only option they have is to attack along here so that they are on a level playing field to attack the main concentration of the Ukrainians here on the top of on the heights, if you like. The other option would be to come from Bakmut itself, but they can't do that. So they did the only thing they could do, but it was just a massive disaster because of all the reasons Hamish Breton Gordon said, which is, you're attacking in the daytime, you're bunched up. I think I think one of them even shot their own vehicle. That might have happened as well. They hit a mine, and then artillery just absolutely took them out. So they lost a lot of equipment there. Now that is worthy of some further analysis, but that's what happened in Klishchiivka. It's going to be about fighting for this railway line that comes down, and the Ukrainians are trying to get across that. They're trying to do that in the Andriivka area. They've failed so far because it's difficult. It's well defended. The Russians are dug in, and there's the embankment itself. So this is raised ground here, and you have to get up and then down and over it, and you've got tree lines, and then, as I say, Russians dug in. So that is difficult, but that's where the defensive line is. Russians do not control Klishchiivka. Of that, I'm pretty certain. Right. Anyway, it really is mainly. Oh no! What I was going to say then about Bakhmut is that it has been quieter. Now we go back to that article that I referenced in the last news video that I'm going to talk about in much greater depth later. Let's just do a control F. We're going to look for Bakhmut here. Right. So Ukraine's continued focus on Bakhmut, the scene of one of the bloodiest battles in the war, has perplexed US intelligence and military officials. Ukraine has invested huge amounts of resources in defending the surrounding Donbas region, and Ukraine's President Zelensky does not want to appear as though he is giving up on trying to retake lost territory. But US officials say politics must at least temporarily take a back seat to sound military strategy. In other words, don't focus on Bakhmut. Now, American officials have told Ukrainian leaders, this is according to New York Times, take it with a pinch of salt, that they can secure the land around Bakhmut with far fewer troops and should reallocate forces to targets in the south. I actually think this is what has happened. Ukrainian leaders have defended their strategy and distribution of forces, saying they are fighting effectively in both the east and the south. The large number of troops is necessary to pressure Bakhmut and to defend against concerted Russian attacks in the country's northeast, they say. Ukrainian commanders are competing for resources and have their own ideas of where they can succeed. But there are sort of claims that they are operating starting to operate maybe a skeleton force around Bakhmut, so that they are doing only as much as they need to. And this is what's interesting, is this is exactly what I said last week, and for the last 2 weeks, is that it's calming down, because I think the primary goal here is not territorial gain, but fixing and attriting, but fixing mainly. And if they can fix the Russian troops here with a minimal force of their own and move some of these experienced troops that have been fighting here for a long time to other front lines like the south, then that's a fairly sensible thing to do. And actually, that's what the New York Times article hints at. So I think, and this is my speculation, of course, but I think that it's calmed down here because the Ukrainians have taken some offensive capability away from Bakmut, so that they are trying to take a little bit of land, maybe around Tinkivka, still trying to get across the railway line, but really put everything on hold there, but still fix the Russian troops in place around this whole area. Uh, so those Russians aren't fighting elsewhere, but the Ukrainians are fighting elsewhere. Then I think that there is some merit to that for sure. Anyway, we're going to go down to the Starimonyska area, Uruzhany, Velika Nova salient. Uh, that's actually Robotna. There's not too much to talk about in terms of different sources, only that both mappers indicate there are some gains. Uh, Surrey Maps admits some gains around Starimonyska here, and biting into this high ground between Starimonyska and Priyutne. Andrew Perpetua had this changed some days ago now. Surrey Maps is just catching up a little bit with that, I think. No sort of talk about what's going on near Zavetny Bazhanya and further to the south on towards Starimonyska, but it appears that the Ukrainians are having some success in taking out this salient. So Andrew Perpetua then shows some gains for the Russians for the Ukrainians north of Priyutne into this area. Remember, I've talked about how there's this ravine here, this kind of river ravine that is heavily mined, and that forms the basis of a defensive line for the Russians. And the Ukrainians are finding it too difficult to get over that. It's just the terrain and the mining means that they can only really come in from the east and from the west, which is exactly what they're doing. So now that they've got more robust control over Uruzhany and Starimonyska, they can concentrate on moving from the east, and also while they're pressuring Priyutne from the north, they're getting more consistent control over this territory and are able to push in from the west. And you are seeing this area starting to be chipped away, so that in a few days' time, I imagine you'll get a straight line across there, and the Ukrainians will be concentrating on Priyutne and Zavetne Bazhanya, and of course Starimonyska. So that's what's going on in the Velika Nova salient. We're seeing gradual increases, but again, is that enough for some people to be satiated? Is it a satisfactory gain for some analysts? For me, it is what it is. It will take as long as it takes when one of your success criteria is not losing your own troops. When we talk about the trouble the Ukrainians are having with recruiting their own troops at the moment, some challenges there, then one of your goals is definitely going to be not losing troops. So when these unknown American officials are saying they should throw troops in and overcome these minefields, and you will lose a bunch of troop and equipment, but then it will be a kind of flooding through there. The Ukrainians are possibly thinking, yeah, actually, we don't really want to lose our troops doing that. It's easy for you to say we should sacrifice some of our troops, but actually, we're having trouble maybe recruiting enough of them, so we want to keep hold of them, and we'll do it slowly, and therefore the metric of success isn't taking into account time frames necessarily. At least in the immediacy, you might talk about elections and war fatigue and stuff like that, but for the Ukrainians, no, we want to take this slowly and effectively, and losing as few troops as possible. When we come to the Robotna axis or sector, is really odd here. So it's not so odd, actually. We can pretty much predict what Surrey Maps would say, which is counterattacks, successful counterattacks. I talked to you yesterday and the last few days, I think, about how when Ukraine takes a settlement or any area of land, the Russians will do counterattacks straight away. Now, what Surrey Maps will do, it seems, is towing the party line with the Russian MOD, is saying that, they've done a counterattack. And it may be that Russian troops got to a position, but then were repelled. But then they say, look, we've done a counterattack, we've taken all this land back. And that hasn't happened. This didn't happen. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, not true. So following the arrival of new reinforcements, the Russian army launched a counterattack and managed to recover the recent lost positions in the center of Robotna town. Now, this is yesterday morning, right? But I didn't report that yesterday morning. It came out just after I would have done my video. But that would not have been true. There would have been counterattacks that were repelled, and this leads to mapping that looks rather weird, which is Syriac maps saying the Russians have made gains in Robotna, and Andrew Perpetua, who looks at shelling and whatnot, says no, they've been pushed out of Robotna, and the Russian line is now south of Robotna. And in fact, some of the areas to the west of Robotna are also being cleared back. And then to the southeast over here, on the way to Verbove, or kind of west of Verbove, the Ukrainians are making further gains as well. So they really are moving down. As well as apparently moving towards Verbove too. So Andrew Perpetua talked about the different options the Ukrainians have with regard to attacking Verbove. The problem is here, uh, when you start sort of coming out of here, the biggest areas of trench lines are around this whole sector. Is just a bit of a nightmare, and it makes me wonder, how wise it was to attack through here. But you wouldn't want to necessarily go anywhere further to the southeast, I don't think, because I think there's a major sort of confluence of trench lines over there. I'll need to get the trench map up in a second. Right. Anyway, what do the sources say? Robotna, all civilians were evacuated. The southern positions are now being cleared, and we're waiting for official confirmation. Situation in the area of the village of Robotna, the Russians have been completely knocked out of the southern part of the village. Counterattacks are taking place from their side with the aim of regaining the lost positions. And then more recently, Ukrainian troops were successful in the direction of Novopokropivka on the southern front. So this is the Ukrainian General Staff talking about there are successes towards Novopokropivka. Now, if they were still in fighting over Robotna, they're not going to be talking about ground successes around Novopokropivka. So I think that basically implies that Robotna is now firmly in the control of the Ukrainians, and they are looking further to the south for their next sort of target. Here, Getty then further says the advance of the Ukrainians in the direction of the village of Verbove, where the defense line of the Russians passes was recorded. Here, for every landing, there are heavy battles, minefields that prevent rapid progress. Despite this, there is progress on the part of the Ukrainians, and that is talking about this gain here, but also moving in this direction too. And then if we go on to Tim White here saying the bravado from Russian bloggers about the counterattack in Robotna, refer back to Syriac maps here, uh, has disappeared today. Now they say they hold the area to the south of the small town. So now you've got Russian mill bloggers saying, actually, no, we are in defense here, which is exactly what Andrew Perpetua says, is not what Syriac map says, although they may well update their map today. That is from a day ago. However, Ukraine says its troops are beyond there and now entrenched at the entrance at Novopokropivka further to the south. So this is where the Ukrainians are. We are seeing consistent small gains every day, but I think this is really significant. So American officials or whatever, New York Times might say this is slow and not effective enough. But actually, I think you're starting to see a gaining of momentum, and more land being gained and significant settlements being liberated. And this is significant because we are into the area of the Surovikin line now, and that I think is very significant. Anyway, that's pretty much the front line. Not too much going on elsewhere. It will be interesting to see whether the Ukrainians do take some of those pieces of advice into account, and we start seeing more concerted efforts to break through these areas. If it's true that Ukrainians have broken through the densest areas of minefields, then again, you might see a pickup in terms of momentum. I think the initiative is in Ukrainians' hands here, uh, but this is a difficult area for trench lines. Let's go and check that out. Yeah, so we've got some pretty hectic trench lines around to the south of Robotna, so Novopokropivka there to the south, and then another line behind there. It's a bit of a nightmare. If we look at the larger map here, then here we've got Robotna, so we've got some fairly major trench lines. This is what the Ukrainians have overcome there, but you can see it's much more. It looks far more built up in terms of trenches, or built down. Behind there, you have this area over there that looks like an absolute nightmare. and that's where you wouldn't want to go. And that's what Andrew Perpetua is saying. You don't want to go through Verbova and continue going, because you start reaching this kind of area. So you really want to be coming in behind there, and then somehow overcoming this trench line. But then you're getting to Tokmak and this other settlement there. Just is a bit of a nightmare. I don't know why this. Maybe the Russians were trying to funnel the Ukrainians through here, and it's just insanely mined or something like that. There's some reason why that doesn't appear to be a major route of attack for the Ukrainians, and then overcoming only this area of trench line. So it's pretty difficult all around there. Which is you go back to Velika Nova, Starimonyska, and it's somewhat easier if you can get through that area. Then so I say all the way down to Mariupol. But the Russians have been continuing to build trench lines whilst this counteroffensive has been taking place. Anyway, that's the seriously truncated Frontline update for you. Apologies, it's not the full one it normally would be. I'm now going to go on to do that larger analysis of whether the counteroffensive is being successful, or whether it is being something of a failure compared to what I think are problematic assumptions made by many analysts using the wrong metrics because they have the wrong objectives in mind. Anyway, I'm going to go on and make that now. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share, and all that kind of stuff. Blow whistles and ring bells and do YouTube things. Take care. Speak soon.